Welcome to a new episode of Walking the Talk. My name is Melissa, and today I'm very excited to be speaking to Alex Vacca, who is the co-founder of Raise Nutrition. Hello, Alex.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. And thank you so much for making the time for me today.
Pleasure. It's our first time on a podcast, so excited to be here.
Really? Oh, wow. That's amazing. I'm also really excited because every time I record a new podcast, I learn something new. So far, it's sometimes been good things, sometimes it's been bad things about IT stuff. But I'm super excited for every new episode. So let's see how this goes. In order to get started, I prepared a few questions for you just to kind of warm up and to break the ice, if you wish. So if you're ready, I'm going to start with the first question.
Sure thing. Let's get started.
Question number 1. What's your favorite food?
Favorite food, I would say Thailandese curry. That's my usual meal prep.
That sounds really good. Question number 2. Do you prefer coffee or tea?
Coffee by far, but always before 4 p.m. Trying to not disturb my sleep with too much caffeine.
That's smart. I do exactly the same. Question number 3. Is it okay to put pineapple on a pizza?
Depends where you are, but I think that in the south of Italy, you better not. But in the rest of the world, I guess it's quite accepted. So,
Question number 4. What was the last thing that you Googled?
the last thing I Googled was how to fix a slider on Webflow. I'm like building some website at the moment, and I'm trying to figuring it out by Googling stuff. So that was my last query.
Google is your best friend.
Indeed.
Question number 5. Describe yourself in 3 words.
Curious, European, driven.
Nice. Very nice combination. And I think that also brings us to our, first topic of the day, so to say. You're European. You're originally from Belgium, right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm originally from Brussels.
So you have an affinity for food, I was told.
For food, yeah, my parents have been in the food industry since a very long time. My mom has been in the food industry for 25 years, so I've been born in it, if I may say.
Wow, that's incredible. And I have the feeling that Raise Nutrition has also something to do with food.
Yes, indeed. Like maybe I can give a small timeline of how we got there with the idea. But
Yes,
in a
please, tell us.
nutshell, my parents have been in the food industry for a very long time, as I said. So basically, my grandfather had the idea to start a marzipan factory like 50 years ago or something. And he started very small, like peeling the almonds by hand. And little by little, the company developed. He spent his entire career developing the company. And then when he reached 65, he decided to sell it back after all the years that he had spent developing the whole company. And then my mom, back at that time, she was a primary school teacher, but she was like telling herself, if it worked for my dad, maybe I could give it a try as well. So she decided to pick up the idea to get the client list, and she started producing marzipan as well. And then she expanded to other raw materials for chocolate makers and bakeries around Europe. So she started producing nougatine, marzipan, hazelnut crunch, so all the raw materials you can think of to decorate pastries and chocolate. And now they're still in business. So they've been asking for quite a few years for me to join the family business, but I've always said that I first wanted to have my first experience myself. But yeah, maybe one day I could get maybe a bit more involved in the family business.
Honestly, chocolate and pastries, that sounds like paradise.
That also sounds very cliche and very Belgian.
Maybe, but I was in Brussels once and I tried very delicious chocolate and I don't know, pralines, and oh my God, it was heaven.
Yeah, I think that's one of the landmark of Belgium. Like usually when people are referring to Belgium, the usual questions is about French fries, chocolate, beers, and probably Tomorrowland.
Well, that sounds about right. But so you were in fact working on your own project last year. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? What was your project?
Yeah, sure thing. So I've been now living in Germany for almost 2 years. So I spent first 1 year in Leipzig. It's a city in East Germany, maybe 1 hour from Berlin. And I was working there in e-commerce. And during that time, with a really good friend of mine that I met in Amsterdam a few years ago, we decided that we wanted to maybe get started with our first entrepreneurial venture. We just spent a few months deciding where we would go because he was more keen on going to Amsterdam. I was more keen to go to Berlin because I was already in Germany. And after a few discussions, we decided to move together to Berlin. And to put some background story, it was around the time of the first lockdown, so we moved in Berlin to Berlin in April. And before that, we went like on a trip together to India for a month. We had to go back early because of the beginning of Corona, so we had to take one of the last flights from India to Europe. And then in the end, we're like, okay, it might not be the best time ever to move to a new city and to start a new business, but you know what? Why not? We don't know how long it's gonna last. So we decided. I think we arrived on the 9th of April here in Berlin. And then we started the journey by making a lot of research. Since the world was changing a lot around that time, we started to just try to make a few research about all the industry that were being disrupted and changed with the new pandemic that was starting. And through that, we started to make a few proposals, like a few industries that we were like both interested in. We are both super interested in biohacking, nutrition, health. So we started to have a few dots that we could start to connect with also the family factory that we could start using. So with that, we're like, okay, let's try to make something that can be sold online through e-commerce because most people are going to be way more likely to buy products around a D2C model, so direct to consumer. So we decided to look at the different products that were easily shippable and that would also be produced in the family factory. So one of the first idea was actually to get into the protein bar industries, but as you can imagine, the protein bar industry is like super competitive. You've got a lot of players, a lot of different brands that can already sell their products for very cheap. So we're like maybe thinking to try to get the product under a new angle. And around that time, I don't know if you've already heard about the nootropics. Does that ring a bell?
I think I've heard of it before, but it's definitely a new field. So maybe you want to elaborate quickly on what it is about.
Yeah, nootropics usually when I wanna make it super straightforward, I always asking people if they've seen Limitless with Bradley Cooper. It's like the super famous movie when he's popping a pill and he's developing his brain capacity by tenfold. So yeah, that's just a movie, unfortunately, but there is still like a booming industry behind that for all the brain supplements. So a lot of people are getting more and more interested into consuming supplements or omega-3, vitamin D, that's becoming super mainstream. But you've also like a wide range of supplement that you can take to foster your productivity, your memory, your concentration. And so we had the idea to integrate these brain supplements directly inside of food and drinks in order to make this product more mass market. So we kind of combine the idea of nootropics and the protein bar to mix it together and to come up with a product that we would call the brain bar. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the first idea for Raise Nutrition, kind of democratize the access to nootropics. So that was the beginning of the journey. I think since we arrived in Berlin, it maybe took us 1.5 months to brainstorm around ideas, and after 1.5 months, we were set on the idea. Like, okay, let's try to market this brain bar.
I think when people first heard your proposal, I don't know, maybe I can imagine that the reactions must have been either very curious and very positive or very skeptical and, oh, this sounds kind of, like magic. This can't be true. Like either one or the other. I can't imagine anything in between.
Yeah, I think it really depends at who we were asking, but you're right. Like some people were super enthusiastic by the yeah, by the value proposition behind it, to just like consume a snack that could like foster your concentration, and some other people were like super dubious about the claim benefits. But the thing we're always saying is that the supplement industry has been there for like many years, and for sure there is like a lot of scammy products, but you have also some very legit products that people are consuming now on a daily basis. If you look at omega-3 and vitamin D, it's
Hmm.
becoming super common for most people to consume it on a daily basis.
Definitely. I mean, you can also buy them everywhere now. I mean, you can get them even in a supermarket, or you can, buy it in like a fancy online shop where you also buy protein powder, maybe. So a lot of people that also go to the gym are definitely interested in that.
Yeah, indeed. Like, and I think that the supplements industry is just like getting bigger and bigger with the years. And so that's why it was also one trend that we wanted to capitalize on. And we were really picky about the products that we wanted to integrate in our bars, because the nootropic industry can seem very sketchy when you look at the nootropics Reddit, for example. You've got like countless amounts of different nootropic type that you can consume, and it's true that for most of them, there hasn't been like a real scientific backing behind it. But for some, it starts to have some proper research, yeah, trying to back all the claims for the different compounds.
You said that you co-founded this company with your friend that you met a couple of years ago in Amsterdam. I believe his name is Sam, right?
Yeah, indeed.
So, can you tell us more about, how do you choose your co-founder? Because at least I have heard always people saying, on the one hand, definitely don't work with your friends because, well, then there is friendship and work things getting into conflict and the friendship might be ruined, that sort of thing. And then on the other hand, I heard people telling me, oh, but why wouldn't you work with a friend? Because you know your friend very well, you know his strengths and weaknesses, and you know what you're getting into when you work with that person. So can you tell us more about how did your relationship come to this point that you said, okay, yes, we're going to work together, and how did your relationship develop from that moment onwards?
Yeah, I think that both reasonings are very valid. In our case, Sam and I, we met during a program that we both took part in. I think it was 3 years ago. So we were part of the Growth Tribe traineeship. So Growth Tribe is a startup in Amsterdam, where basically they were teaching some people in their 20s all the skills about growth hacking, which is kind of digital marketing. And so we met there. We through the program we had to sign a 1 year contract in different startups. So Sam worked for 1 year in Amsterdam, and I was working in Leipzig in Germany. But during the whole program, we really clicked, and we were like both super convinced that as soon as we would be done with our 1 year contract, we would just like meet up somewhere in a big city in Europe to start working on a project. And it's true that the conversation arose a few times that we're like both discussing if it was really the best idea for us to start something together. One thing that we did that always sound quite funny for people when we tell the stories, that before deciding to move together, we were like, okay, let's try maybe to go on a trip together. Let's travel for a month, do some proper backpacking, and if we can still stand each other after this month, then it could already be a a good sign that we can work together. So that's what we did by going to India. We spent pretty much 2 weeks traveling around India. We also did like a Vipassana retreat. That's also like a really big topic. We did a 10 days silence meditation retreat, which was like really intense. And we went through it together. So it was like a nice experience to share for both of us. And yeah, after the month in India, everything was going super well. We hadn't had like any major arguments. We're like still super convinced about our motivation and the things that we could achieve together. So we're like set on moving together to Berlin. So it was getting in the plane, getting back to Europe, and then 1 week later we both joined for a new adventure in Berlin. And I think that's something that's really worth discussing, because the relationship between co-founders. I don't know if you've looked at the different numbers, but when you look at the most likely cause for stop of a project in a startup, it's usually for disagreement between co-founders. So I think it's a topic that's really worth digging into, because that's probably what's gonna make or break the success of a project. So for us, we learn a ton through it, and yeah, even though we worked together for 9 months and we decided to stop the project in December, we are still best friends. So I'm really happy with the outcome.
First of all, I would like to say I love the idea of putting your friendship to this stress test before, getting serious. I love the idea. Absolutely. I don't know why people would think that's weird, but I think it's genius because, well, if you can manage such an adventure together, because I mean, there's obviously probably also things that, I don't know, go wrong, or it's just really intense, like you said, and then you can still get along after that, because that probably shows, the true face of a person in
Yeah,
some
I
in some
totally
way.
agree.
So I absolutely love the idea, and I would recommend that to other people. Well, maybe right now it's not a good idea to send people backpacking, but I don't know, to figure out some way to put, I don't know, to put yourself together into a stress situation and just see how things are going. I love
Yeah.
that. But you also mentioned a couple other interesting things that I would like to dive into, and I'm not sure where to start. But maybe we start with the fact. So what were you most concerned about? Because you mentioned you talked about this concern about, doing something together, that you were also hesitating in some moment. Why was that? What was the reason that you were questioning whether you should be working together?
Yeah, I think it's like the common conversation about yeah, what if things go wrong? Are we still gonna be able to be friends afterward? Because I think that when you go through difficult conversation and difficult decisions that needs to be taken, it might be sometimes a bit challenging for friendship. And so we really worked on our style of communication. If I may say, at the beginning we had yeah, a few disagreements on the way we're like handling things when we were like discussing with people, with like potential investors, with potential freelancers that we wanted to hire. Like I think there is always kind of adaptation periods when you start working together, because yeah, everyone has a different software, if I may say, and I think it's very important to understand the way the other the other person works, and as soon as you understand where are the strong points and the weak points, then it's easier to get along with each other.
Did you have some sort of agreement in the beginning? Like, did you make explicit among each other, okay, if we get into a conflict situation ever, then we will do this no matter what, or no matter how angry we are, or how upset we are, or did you have anything like that?
Something that happened maybe after 3 or 4 months after we started working together, we had like one of the biggest arguments uh, we had, and I think it was just like an accumulation of small things. Was maybe like one day you start working earlier than the other one, and then you feel that the other one has done less work than you, and sometimes it's only like a way to perceive things. Like you might think that you have been working way more, and maybe your co-founder is gonna see it in a totally different way. So after that really big argument that we had, we took really, I think it was like one of the biggest conversation I've ever had. It was like maybe for 2 or 3 hours, like just like sitting in front of each other, and we decided that from that day, every time something would bother any of us two, we would like discuss it right away. So rather than to wait for things to take like extreme proportions, we would just, as soon as there is something that would bother after a meeting, after a conversation, something I might have said, something he might have said or done, would just like discuss it right away. And after having taken the decision, or our relationship and communication style just improved by a lot.
I'm so happy to hear that. But that's also really tough. I mean, even that is a tough conversation to have for a lot of people, myself included, because well, you don't want to hurt each other's feelings, but then by making something explicit, there's always the chance that, you don't choose the right words to say it, or it just, comes out in a different way than you actually mean it. So it's not easy to have that kind of conversation in the first place. But I think it's definitely a great idea to do that and to make these things explicit.
I think it really depends of the type of person you have in front of you. Sam and I, we've always been super keen on receiving feedback. And even if for some people that would be really bothering to every second day getting like a feedback or like a critique about something you have done or said, for us it was like a way to keep things under control. And so, for example, I can give like a quick example. We would have like a Zoom call with like a potential investor, and Sam would consider that I talk way more than needed, and I took like maybe too much space during the call. Then right after, he would just tell me like, "Hey, listen, like no hard feelings. I just felt that this time you maybe uh, took too much of the speaking time, and maybe for next time, maybe let me talk a little bit more." And so it would be like super small conversation, small follow up. And by doing that, like we avoided having like huge argument, maybe like 1, 2, 3 months from now, that sometimes can just like kill the relationship. So
Hmm. The accumulation of frustration is often much worse than having a small conversation like that,
yeah, indeed.
especially when it explodes at some point. Then things might get ugly.